The whole state was waiting. Everyone was talking about Daniel Foster becoming the youngest governor ever elected. His name was everywhere, on the news and in conversations. People admired his charm and bold ideas. While the public held their breath for the final result, Jaden was at a nearby flower shop. She had found out she was pregnant that morning. The ultrasound photo was folded neatly in her bag. She chose a bouquet of fresh white lilies and carefully placed the photo between the petals. Her plan was simple: go to the hospital, meet with Daniel and give him the flowers. It would be her way of sharing the news with him. But by the time she arrived, everything had changed. Daniel had just lost the election. Moments after the result was announced, his father collapsed from a heart attack and died. Jaden didn't find Daniel. Instead, she met his mother, Eleanor, in the lobby. Eleanor saw her approaching and asked her to step aside with her. She walked to a quiet corner of the hospital lobby and looked Jaden straight in the eye. "You should know that Daniel lost and his father passed just after." Jaden froze, the weight of the news pressing down on her chest. Eleanor's voice was calm as she continued. "The Harrington family is offering to fund his campaign for the next election, but they will only do that if he marries their daughter, Kimberly Harrington. And that's the kind of future he needs now. Either he chooses that, or he stays with you and loses everything." Jaden didn't speak right away. She thought about the man she loved and how much he had already lost in just one day. Now, whatever choice she made could shape the rest of his life. She wanted to fight for him. But maybe the best way to fight was to let go. If leaving meant giving him a real chance at the future he'd worked so hard for, then she guessed that was the only gift she could offer him now. She reached out and handed Eleanor the bouquet. "Give this to him," she said, and left the waiting area. Eleanor waited only until Jaden was out of sight. Then she walked to the nearest bin and dropped the bouquet inside without a second thought. As Daniel sat in the hospital room where his father had just been taken from, a nurse passed by and paused. "Mr. Foster, a young lady came to see you earlier, but I think she spoke with your mother." Daniel looked up slowly. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He didn't need to ask who, he already knew. Without a word, he stood and went to find his mother. When Daniel asked about Jaden, Eleanor already had her answer ready. She said she can't be with someone who keeps failing. She's not interested anymore. But Daniel didn't believe her. He knew Jaden better than that. Instead of arguing, he turned and walked off, determined to find her himself. Eleanor watched him go, then quickly made a call. Kimberly was already at the hospital, and Eleanor told her to meet Daniel at the entrance, anything to stop him from seeing Jaden. By the time Daniel reached the hospital doors, Kimberly was already there. She walked up to him calmly, saying something soft, resting one hand lightly on his arm. By then, Nicola was already outside. She turned slightly, glancing back toward the hospital entrance, and her eyes landed on them standing together. Kimberly had stepped close to him while saying something quietly with one hand still on his arm. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring from a distance. Then, without another glance, she turned away and walked to his car. Quietly, she removed the engagement ring from her finger and placed it on the door handle. Later, Daniel reached his car, and as he was about to open the door, the ring slipped off and landed by his feet. He picked it up and stared at it. In that instant, he believed the story. She had left him when everything had fallen apart. 5 years later, Daniel was running for governor again, and this time, things were going well. His career had moved forward, and so had his life. He was now engaged to Kimberly Harrington, and everything seemed to be in order. One day, Daniel went to a company for an official meeting with his assistant. They both entered the elevator to go to one of the upper floors. Just before the elevator doors closed, someone stepped in. It was a woman wearing a janitor's uniform and holding cleaning supplies. She didn't look up right away. But when she finally did, their eyes met. It was Jaden. She gave him a small greeting and he replied. The ride continued quietly, but the moment was filled with a tension neither of them could hide. Then the elevator suddenly jerked. Jaden almost lost her balance, and Daniel reached out to steady her. She stepped away as soon as she regained control and kept her eyes forward. He looked at her. He couldn't believe this was where she ended up. After leaving him, after choosing to walk away, this was what she became? So this was the better life she wanted? She left me only to become a janitor? The elevator doors opened and Jaden stepped out. Just as she did, a man walked toward her and took the cleaning bucket from her hand. He stood close to her, speaking casually. Daniel stared at them, and without thinking, he walked out of the elevator and went toward her. "Who is this?" he asked, looking directly at the man beside her. Jaden answered plainly, "Daniel, this is Leroy. Leroy, meet Daniel." Daniel looked at the man again. Leroy gave a brief nod, then turned back to Jaden. Before anything else could be said, Kimberly appeared. She walked straight to Daniel and held his arm, smiling at Jaden. "Wow, Jaden, it's been so long. You look different," she said. She leaned in closer to Daniel, still holding his arm. "We're getting married soon," she added. "You can come with your friend. We'd love to have you both there." Jaden stood still. The thought of Daniel with someone else bothered her, but she brushed it off. She congratulated them, then added that she wouldn't be able to attend the wedding and left with Leroy. Daniel remained where he was, watching them go. When he finally returned to his meetings, his mind wasn't there. He kept thinking about what he had seen. The way the man hugged her. How he touched her waist. The way they looked at each other while talking. Everything about them looked close, too close. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the thought of Leroy's hand on her. Weeks later, Jaden was serving drinks at a political event full of top officials, and Daniel Foster was one of them. She tried to avoid his side of the room, but luck wasn't on her side. Someone brushed past her, and the tray slipped, spilling red wine all over her white shirt. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked down at the stain. There was no way to hide it, and she hadn't brought a change of clothes. Before she could panic, Daniel stepped forward. He had been standing nearby the whole time, watching her. He removed his jacket and held it out. "Here," he said quietly. She hesitated, then took it and slipped it on. It hung loose on her shoulders, smelling faintly of his cologne. They were still standing there when Leroy appeared. He had a lunchbox in one hand and a look on his face that changed the moment he saw her wearing Daniel's jacket. "I've been looking for you," he said. He glanced at Daniel, then turned to Jaden, holding out the food. "I got you something to eat. Thought you'd be too busy to grab anything." Jaden reached for it, but Daniel stepped in. "She doesn't like mushrooms. I thought you were her boyfriend. Shouldn't you know that?" Jaden's face didn't change. She took the lunchbox from Leroy and opened it without a word. She picked up a piece and put it in her mouth. "I like it now," she said. "People change." Daniel stared at her. "People change, right?" he muttered. "I guess swapping them out gets just as easy too." Leroy stepped closer, clearly irritated. "You don't get to talk to her like that. And she doesn't need your jacket." But Daniel didn't back down. "It wasn't for you. It was for her. Just wash it before returning it. I'm sure it'll smell like mushrooms now." Jaden didn't respond to Daniel again. She ignored him completely and left the event with Leroy. Later that night, Jaden returned home tired. She stepped into the small one-bedroom apartment she shared with her daughter. Bella was on the floor, drawing, with crayons scattered around her. "Mom, I tried calling you earlier but you didn't pick up," Bella said, looking up. "I was at work, baby." "I'm sorry," Jaden told her as she knelt beside her. "I was drawing our family, but I don't know what Daddy looks like." Jaden looked at the drawing, then pulled Bella into a hug. "I'll help you with that later." Once Bella was asleep, Jaden joined Leroy at the small dining table. It was clear he wanted to talk. After a few minutes of silence, he finally brought it up. He asked if she would ever tell Daniel that Bella was his daughter. But Jaden didn't see the point. To her, the risk wasn't worth it. She feared he would try to take Bella. Leroy's voice was quiet but clear. "You deserve someone who actually sees you. Someone like me." Jaden didn't speak right away. She knew Leroy meant well. He always had. He had been there when no one else was. He had watched Bella when she needed help, lent her money without question, and never made her feel ashamed of her situation. He had filled in the gaps, stood in the background, and waited, probably hoping she'd look at him differently one day. But she couldn't give him what he wanted. She cared about him, but not in that way. To her, he was a friend, her best friend. If she gave him hope, it would only hurt both of them. And she didn't want to lose the only real support system she had. She made it clear that she appreciated everything he had done for her and Bella. but also told him she couldn't be what he hoped for, and it would be unfair to pretend otherwise. Leroy said nothing else. He just nodded slowly, as if he'd already expected that answer. The next morning, Jaden was out early again. Between jobs, she barely had time to breathe. She cleaned offices some days and took whatever freelance gigs she could find just to keep up with bills. That afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was a last-minute offer from a stylist agency she sometimes worked with. She accepted immediately. At the venue, a woman handed her a name tag and a clipboard. "Hurry," the woman said. "The client requested you personally." Jaden raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She entered the prep room and set up quickly. A moment later, Daniel walked in, talking on his phone and checking his watch. "Good afternoon, Councilman Foster," Jaden spoke calmly. "Good afternoon," he said simply, his eyes scanning hers. She crossed over to him and reached for the silk tie resting on the dresser. Without a word, she lifted the tie around his neck. Her fingers moved automatically, looping and knotting as she had done many times before. Now, she focused quietly on the task, ignoring the heavy past between them. When she finished and straightened the knot, she said softly, "All set." He looked at her and said quietly, "Some habits just don't go away." But Jaden didn't respond to that. She turned, gathered the kit, and stepped back like a professional, just like she'd trained herself to be. There was no space here for feelings. Daniel stood in the dressing room, still adjusting his suit as the tension of earlier lingered in the air. His best friend and longtime assistant Julian walked in, having seen the way Jaden had fixed Daniel's tie, gave a warning. He reminded Daniel that they'd worked for 5 years to rebuild everything, so he shouldn't get distracted by the past. Not when everything was finally within reach. Daniel just nodded. He knew Julian was right. He couldn't afford any missteps. A few minutes later, Daniel walked onto the stage for his interview. "Mr. Foster," the host began, "what drove you to start over after your last defeat?" Daniel adjusted his posture and replied, 5 years ago, I hit rock bottom and the people closest to me, all left. I had nothing left to lose. And no place to go but up." "But you made it through," the host added. "And congratulations on your engagement to the Harrington heiress," the host said with a smile. "Thank you," Daniel replied, forcing a polite nod. Meanwhile, back at the venue, Jaden was gathering her things after the shoot, ready to disappear quietly. She just wanted to collect her pay and leave. But before she could step out, the woman from the stylist agency returned. "Jaden, wait," the woman said, approaching her. "There's a new offer. Mr. Foster wants you on his image team permanently, for the wedding prep and public appearances." Jaden froze. Her heart dropped a little at the word wedding. "I don't think I can accept it," she said cautiously. The woman replied, lowering her voice. "This is a golden opportunity. The pay is double your current rate. You'll be working directly with him and his fiancée's team. Think of it as steady work for the next few months." Jaden hesitated. The thought of dressing Daniel and helping him prepare to marry someone else made her stomach twist. But the bills at home wouldn't stop piling up. She took a breath, then gave a quiet nod. "I'll take it." The bridal studio buzzed with activity. Jaden stood quietly behind the agency rep as they walked her into the lavish fitting room. "Thank you so much for choosing us to style your wedding," the rep beamed. "This is our stylist, Jaden." The moment Kimberly heard the name, her eyes narrowed. She didn't even need to turn to know. Of course it was her. Daniel's mother shifted slightly at the sound too, her sharp gaze sweeping over Jaden from head to toe. The agency rep smiled as she made the introduction, proudly noting how Mr. Foster had praised Jaden earlier that day, calling her one of the best he'd worked with. Kimberly smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He chose her. Again. The thought twisted something bitter inside her. This girl is still trying to crawl back to him. But not on my watch. Jaden kept it professional, asking Kimberly to stand so she could take her measurements. Kimberly placed her hands on her waist. "I need this gown to fit me perfectly because Daniel likes to hold this waist at events." Jaden said nothing, pen and tape in hand with her face expressionless. But the way Kimberly flaunted everything got under her skin more than usual. And then, without warning, Kimberly flinched and let out a dramatic scream, falling back onto the seat like she had been attacked. She cried out that Jaden had hurt her, clutching her arm like it had been twisted. Daniel's mother was quick to step in, demanding to know what was going on. Kimberly played her role perfectly, accusing Jaden with tearful eyes. That was when Daniel walked in. His gaze swept over the room, stopping when he noticed Kimberly's theatrics and his mother's concern. They both jumped in at once, Kimberly claiming Jaden was unprofessional and his mother urging him to fire her before things got worse. But Daniel didn't answer them. His attention stayed on Jaden. He finally spoke, his voice calm. "Jaden, come with me to my office." As soon as they stepped into the office and the door clicked shut behind them, Jaden looked down at her scarf with a deep frown. "Great," she muttered. "My scarf's ruined." Daniel glanced at her, surprised. "You're injured and that's what you're worried about?" She looked up, adjusting the torn fabric gently. "It's part of my dress code," she said firmly. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to the cabinet, pulled out a small first aid kit, and motioned for her to sit. Then Daniel finally asked, "So that whole thing out there, was that just an act of jealousy?" Jaden blinked, surprised. "Mr. Foster, I really think you've overestimated your charm because not everybody is interested in being your wife." She met his eyes directly now. "And if I've given you that impression at all, I am sorry." She stood as she continued speaking. "And you know what? We can just call it even." Daniel froze. "Even?" he repeated, stepping closer. "Jaden, for things to be even remotely okay, you'd need to look me in the eye and tell me all those promises you made 5 years ago were lies. That the love we shared wasn't real. And that you don't feel anything for me anymore." He stared at her, voice low. "Until you say all that, things are not okay. Not after what you did." Jaden's voice softened. "You know what? I have my own life now. I have my own future, and it doesn't include you." She reached for the doorknob, her back to him. "And I really don't have to look you in the eyes." Daniel was on his way back to the office after a long meeting, one hand on the wheel, his mind already shifting to his next appointment. But as the car slowed near a familiar street downtown, something caught his eye through the large boutique window. She was getting married? He hit the brakes, staring through the glass. It was Jaden, standing in front of a mirror in a white gown. A sales attendant was behind her, adjusting the veil gently. For a moment, Daniel couldn't move. His heart slammed against his chest. He didn't wait to find out more. He turned around and left quickly, not trusting himself to stay. When he got to the office, he kept pacing while Julian tried to calm him down. "She's getting married," Daniel said, frustration boiling inside him. "To that Leroy guy. I can't let that happen." Julian sighed. "Let this go, man. Let her go. She left already and clearly has moved on if she's getting married." Daniel shook his head. "No. I can't. I have to stop it." "Stop what?" "A wedding that's none of your business." Daniel ignored him. His mind was made up. As Daniel stood by his office window, still tense, his mind raced for clues. He remembered the boutique. It wasn't just any shop, it was Elite Brides, a high-end bridal studio that catered to exclusive clients. He picked up his phone and called Julian to his office. "Find out if Elite Brides is hosting any weddings this weekend. Or if any of their dresses were booked for an event. Use the name Leroy if needed." Julian raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You're serious about this?" Daniel gave him a look. "Just do it." Later that evening, Julian returned with the information. "There's a private wedding booked for Saturday at the Crescent Hall. Leroy's name is on the guest list." That's all I could get without drawing suspicion. Julian rubbed his forehead, clearly stressed by the situation. "You're actually serious about doing this?" "I'm dead serious. I need to be there." "To crash a wedding you think she's the bride in?" Julian asked. Daniel grabbed his coat. "Exactly." Julian exhaled, muttering under his breath as he reached for his tablet. "This is going to be a disaster." Daniel arrived at Crescent Hall, later than he planned. Traffic had been horrible, and he'd spent too long rehearsing what he might say. By the time he stepped out of his car and rushed toward the entrance, the ceremony was already in full swing. He paused by the doorway, catching his breath. Just then, the officiant's voice echoed through the hall. "If anyone has any reason these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, Speak now or forever hold your peace. Daniel didn't think, he burst through the doors. I object, he shouted. Gasps filled the room. All heads turned, including Jaden's. Her eyes widened in shock as she recognized him standing at the doorway. For a moment, he felt victorious. But then, the bride turned. It wasn't Jaden. His stomach dropped as he stood awkwardly, completely frozen. Daniel's best friend Julian acted quickly. He stepped forward, holding a wrapped gift and speaking with practiced calm. He doesn't mean it like that, he said with a polite laugh. He's actually a close friend of the couple. He just didn't want them getting married without him being here. He's dramatic like that, always making an entrance. He gave a reassuring smile and gently guided Daniel toward an empty seat. The guests chuckled lightly and the ceremony continued. Jaden, seated near the middle of the hall, lowered her eyes, hiding the smile tugging at her lips. He had thought she was the bride and came to stop the wedding. That meant he still cared. She held on to that thought as the ceremony came to an end. It had been a week since Daniel crashed the wedding and now, they were all seated together for a styling meeting. Daniel, his fiancée Kimberly, and Jaden. Jaden kept her focus on the fabric samples, only speaking when needed while Daniel barely paid attention, his eyes often drifting toward Jaden. Her calmness irritated him. She acted like nothing happened. Like he hadn't yelled "I object" in front of strangers, because he thought she was the bride. When the meeting ended, Daniel didn't leave immediately. He lingered near the corridor, his eyes fixed on the hallway where he knew Jaden would soon pass. When she finally did, he moved toward her and stopping her just before she turned to the corner. She looked up at him surprised. He asked if Leroy was really her boyfriend and her response came without hesitation. She told him not only was Leroy her boyfriend, but they were now engaged. Daniel stood there stunned. The words didn't sit well. Just as he opened his mouth to question her further, a familiar voice called out his name. Kimberly. Daniel quickly ducked into a recessed doorway just beside them, hidden from view. Kimberly approached a moment later, scanning the hallway. Her tone was suspicious when she asked if Jaden had seen Daniel. Jaden shook her head and said no. Kimberly stepped in closer, her voice now cold and suspicious. You're always around him. I hope you're not trying anything funny. Jaden looked her in the eye. I'm not interested in your man, she said. Whatever was between us ended years ago and I no longer want him. Kimberly gave her a long look, then scoffed and walked away. Jaden adjusted the strap on her bag and left in the opposite direction, not once looking back. Daniel remained behind the doorway, watching her go. Every word she had said rang in his ears. She doesn't want me anymore, he muttered to himself. The words were bitter in his mouth, but he wasn't ready to believe them. Then quietly, to no one in particular he said, we'll see about that. Jaden had barely sat down at her desk when she was called in by the agency director. Her footsteps were heavy as she made her way to the office. She stood quietly as the woman gave her the news. Daniel Foster had pulled out of the wedding styling contract. It was the agency's biggest deal of the season, and now it was gone. The reason? He said it was because of her. Jaden didn't get a chance to explain herself. Her boss only cared about the damage, so the order was clear: go to Daniel Foster and convince him to return to the deal. No fixing it meant no job. Jaden nodded once and left the office. She picked up her bag and headed straight for his building. Her mind raced the whole way. Why would he say it was because of her? Was this a way of getting back at her? She didn't know. But one thing was clear. She couldn't afford to lose this job. On getting to his office, she was told to sign in at the front desk and wait. His assistant informed her that Daniel was in a meeting and would attend to her soon. She waited. Minutes turned into hours. And by the time the sun had started to set, she was still sitting there, tired, frustrated, and angry. No one had come to get her. Fed up, she stormed out of the building, got into her car and drove away. As she merged onto the main road, her phone rang. It was Daniel's assistant. Mr. Foster is ready to see you now, he said. Jaden didn't hide her annoyance. She asked the assistant to hand the phone to Daniel. A moment later, Daniel came on the line. She didn't hold back. She told him he was being childish. She had been waiting the entire day, missing out on work, all because of some game he was playing. As she continued talking, a loud blare of a horn interrupted her. In the next second, a car smashed into hers from the side. Then, everything went dark. The next day, Jaden slowly opened her eyes. It took her a moment to realize she was in a hospital. She blinked in confusion when she saw Daniel sitting beside her bed. Jaden tried to sit up. Her body ached, but she ignored the pain. She couldn't afford to stay in a hospital bed. There was work to do, responsibilities waiting, and too many things she had to keep together. She swung her legs to the side, determined to stand. But Daniel was already in front of her, gently stopping her. He told her she needed to rest, that the stylist job was back on. He had already spoken to her agency, and not only was the project back, but they were offering more money. She stared at him in disbelief. Why now? After everything you pulled, ignoring me all day and making me wait outside like a joke. That accident was your fault. Daniel lowered his gaze. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of that to happen. Before she could respond, the door opened. Leroy stepped into the room, holding the hand of her daughter. Bella gasped when she saw Jaden and ran forward with a bright smile. Mommy. She threw herself into Jaden's arms. Daniel stood frozen. His eyes locked on the child. You have a daughter? He asked quietly. Who's her father? Jaden froze.